Maya sat by the window of her small rented room, looking at the city lights in the distance. The streets below were noisy, full of people going home from work, cars honking and the sounds of vendors calling out. But inside her room there was silence, the kind of silence that felt heavy. She placed her hand on her textbook, but the words blurred in front of her eyes. She had been studying for hours, yet her mind was not on the pages. Her mind was on rent, on food, on bills, on the fact that her part-time job barely covered her needs. She was only 22, but life had already given her more struggles than she ever imagined. Her mother worked as a cleaner in a hospital, often returning home late at night with tired feet and sore hands. Her younger brother still went to high school, and Maya often sent part of her earnings to help him buy books or pay for transport. She was proud to be in college, but every day felt like a fight to hold everything together. One evening, after finishing her job at the cafe near campus, her manager asked her to help serve at a private charity event. Maya didn't know much about it, but she agreed because extra money meant she could buy groceries and maybe even pay a little toward her tuition. The event was held at a grand hall, with chandeliers, expensive suits, and elegant gowns. Maya wore the simple black and white uniform given to the servers, and she moved quietly between the tables, carrying trays of food and glasses of water. It felt like she had stepped into another world, a world where people laughed easily, where no one worried about the price of bread or the cost of electricity. As she poured water for one of the guests, an older gentleman sitting near the corner noticed her. His hair was white and his suit looked perfectly tailored. His face showed years of experience, but his eyes carried a gentleness that surprised her. He spoke kindly when he asked for water, unlike some guests who didn't even look at her when she served them. "Thank you," he said with a smile. His voice was deep but warm. Maya nodded politely. "You're welcome, sir." Through the evening, she passed his table several times. She noticed that he didn't laugh loudly like others, nor did he seem interested in showing off. He watched the stage quietly, sometimes clapping when a speech ended. There was something different about him. After the event was over and Maya was about to leave, the same man approached her near the entrance. She felt nervous, unsure why a guest would want to speak to her. "Young lady," he said gently, "you work very hard, don't you?" Maya hesitated. "Yes, sir. I try." He looked at her as if he could see through her struggles. "What's your name?" "Maya," she replied softly. He smiled again. "Maya, it suits you. My name is Richard." From that night, Maya thought she would never see him again. But a week later, when she was helping her manager deliver food orders to a business office, she saw Richard again. He was in the office speaking to several people. When he noticed her, he excused himself and walked over. "I didn't expect to see you again," Richard said kindly. "Neither did I," Maya admitted with a shy smile. He asked about her studies, her work, and her dreams. Maya found herself talking to him in a way she didn't expect. Usually she kept her struggles hidden, but with him the words just came out. She told him about her mother, her brother, her late nights of work, and her fear of not being able to finish college. Richard listened carefully without interrupting. Then, after a long pause, he said something that nearly made her drop the food tray. "Maya," he said slowly, "I am an old man. I have lived a long life. I have made money, I have seen the world, but I have also lost things. Friends, family, and time. I am lonely, and I am tired of being surrounded by people who only see me as a bank account. You are different. You remind me of honesty. That's why I'm going to ask you something unusual." Maya stared at him, confused. "What do you mean, sir?" He looked at her seriously. "Will you marry me?" The tray almost slipped from her hands. Her heart beat fast, and she couldn't breathe for a moment. She thought she had misheard him. "Marry you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," Richard said firmly. "I don't expect love at first sight, and I don't expect miracles. But I do want a companion, someone who isn't afraid to speak the truth. In return, I will give you stability, protection, and support to finish your dreams." Maya's mouth went dry. She wanted to laugh, to cry, to run away, to ask if this was some kind of joke, but his face showed no sign of playing games. He was serious. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling. Questions filled her head. What would people say? Would they call her a gold digger? Would her mother be ashamed? Could she really marry a man more than 50 years older than her? At the same time, another thought kept whispering in her heart. What if this is the chance to change everything? What if this is how she saves her family and herself? The next day, she told her mother about the proposal. Her mother dropped the dish she was washing, shocked. "Maya, he is old enough to be your grandfather," her mother said with disbelief. "I know, Mama," Maya whispered, tears in her eyes. "But he is kind. He doesn't treat me like I'm nothing. And he wants to help me. He wants to give me a chance." Her mother stayed quiet for a long time, then finally said, "I only want you to be happy. If you choose this, it will not be easy. People will talk. But if your heart tells you he is honest, then maybe this is your path." Maya walked to campus that day feeling like the world was heavier than ever. Her classmates were laughing in the courtyard, carefree, living in a world she didn't feel part of. She looked at her torn shoes and thought about Richard's gentle eyes. That evening, she met Richard again. They sat in a quiet cafe where he promised her that he would respect her, that he didn't want to control her life. He only wanted someone who would stand by him and keep him company in his final years. Maya looked down at her hands, then finally whispered, "Yes." Richard smiled softly, his eyes shining with relief. "Thank you, Maya. You have given me a gift I thought I would never receive again." And so the news spread like wildfire. A poor black student marrying a 75-year-old millionaire. People whispered in hallways, laughed behind her back, and called her names she didn't deserve. But Maya held her head high even as doubt filled her heart. She told herself this was for her family, for her future, and maybe, just maybe, for something more. The wedding was small, yet it made the biggest noise in town. Maya and Richard stood in front of a quiet crowd inside a modest hall. Richard wore a clean black suit, his hair combed neatly, his hands trembling slightly as he held Maya's. She wore a simple white dress, nothing too grand, but her beauty came from the calm strength in her eyes. There were no dancing lights or hundreds of guests, only a few family members and close friends. Yet outside, the whispers grew louder than any music. People shook their heads, some laughed, others called it shameful. To many it looked like a trade, youth for money. But to Richard it was a gift, and to Maya it was both a heavy choice and a quiet hope. When the vows were said, Maya's hands were cold in Richard's warm grip. She whispered the words, her voice steady though her heart raced. Richard looked at her with eyes that carried gratitude more than passion. His words trembled, but each one felt honest. After the ceremony, they walked out into the sunlight. Some reporters had already caught the story. Flashes of cameras surprised Maya, who lowered her eyes, feeling the sting of judgment. People in the street murmured as they passed, some smiling kindly but most staring with suspicion. Richard noticed and gently placed his hand over hers. "Do not let them steal your peace, Maya," he said softly. "Let them talk. Only we know the truth of our steps." Maya nodded, though deep inside the voices of others still echoed. The first days of marriage felt strange. Maya moved into Richard's large house on the edge of the city. The house looked more like a museum than a home. High ceilings, polished floors, old paintings on the walls, and furniture that looked too expensive to touch. She had never lived anywhere like this before. At first, she felt like a visitor, not a wife. The maids and staff looked at her with curious eyes. Some respected her quietly, but others whispered in corners, their faces full of doubt. "She's so young," one muttered when they thought she couldn't hear. "She only came for his wealth." Maya carried the words silently, pressing them deep into her heart. At night, when she lay in the big bed beside Richard, she thought about her small room, her textbooks, and her mother's tired smile. She asked herself if she had made the right decision. Richard noticed her unease. One evening, as they sat in the wide garden with roses and tall trees, he said, "I know this feels heavy for you, Maya, but I want you to remember, you are not trapped here. You are free to study, free to live, free to be yourself. I only ask for your kindness and your company." Maya looked at him surprised. She had expected demands, restrictions, or even control. Instead, he offered freedom. That night, she began to see him differently, not just as an old man, but as someone who valued her spirit. Days turned into a rhythm. Maya attended her classes during the day, and in the evenings she returned to Richard. They would often share dinner together. Sometimes Richard told her stories about his past. He spoke about how he had started his business with nothing but a small shop and long nights of hard work. He spoke about losing his wife many years ago, and how the silence of his house had grown louder as time passed. His children, grown and distant, rarely visited. He had wealth but not warmth, power but no peace. Maya listened carefully, her heart softening. She realized he was not a man who wanted to show off his riches. He was a man who wanted someone to see him as more than money. One night after dinner, Richard surprised her with a question. "Maya," he said, his tone thoughtful, "do you ever wonder why I chose you?" Maya blinked. She hesitated before answering. "Yes, sometimes I do. People say things. They think I came here for your money, but I didn't. Still, I don't understand why you picked me." Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "Because you remind me of what I once lost. When I look at you, I see honesty. I see struggle, yes, but also courage. You work hard, even when no one claps for you. And that is rare, Maya. Most people want shortcuts, but you take the long road." Maya's eyes grew moist. She had heard many insults, but rarely such genuine praise. She lowered her gaze and whispered, "Thank you." Slowly, their bond grew. They laughed sometimes at little things, like when Maya tried to cook in the big kitchen and accidentally burned the toast, or when Richard struggled with his old phone and asked her for help. These small moments stitched their lives together, gently but firmly. Still, the outside world was unkind. One day, when Maya walked into her classroom, she overheard two girls talking. "She married that old man," one said, rolling her eyes. "Of course she did. Free tuition, free everything." "Must be nice," the other replied. Maya pretended not to hear, but her chest tightened. She sat in her seat staring at her notebook, her hands shaking slightly. That evening, when Richard asked her how her day was, she forced a smile and said, "It was fine." She didn't want to add to his worries, but Richard was not blind. He watched her carefully. "Maya," he said gently, "don't hide your pain from me. I can see it." Tears spilled from her eyes before she could stop them. "They don't understand, Richard. They think I'm using you. They think I don't care about you." Richard reached across the table and took her hand. "Then let them think what they want. Time will show them the truth. Maya, never let the noise of others drown out the voice of your own heart." His words gave her strength. On the 7th evening of their marriage, something unusual happened. Richard invited Maya to his study. It was a quiet room with tall bookshelves, old leather chairs, and the smell of polished wood. On the desk lay an envelope sealed and neat. Maya frowned. "What is this?" Richard looked at her with eyes full of seriousness. "Inside is something I want you to know about. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. There are things I must tell you, secrets of my life, choices I made and plans I have. You deserve to know everything." Maya's heart skipped. She nodded slowly, unsure what to expect. Richard placed his hand gently on hers. "Maya, I trust you more than I trust anyone else, and in time, you will see why." That night, as Maya lay awake, she stared at the ceiling of the grand bedroom. The words echoed in her head. Secrets, plans, trust. She felt both curious and afraid. What could Richard be hiding, and why did he believe in her so strongly? The marriage that began with whispers of judgment was slowly turning into something else, something deeper. Yet Maya knew the real test was still ahead. The 7th day of their marriage began quietly. Maya woke up early and looked around the large bedroom, still unable to believe she lived in such a place. The golden curtains, the tall windows, and the peaceful silence felt different from the noisy apartment she once called home. Yet even with all this comfort, her heart was restless. Richard's words from the night before still echoed in her mind. "Inside is something I want you to know about. Secrets, plans, trust." She wondered all morning what he meant. Richard spent most of the day in his study. He was writing letters, making calls, and meeting his lawyer. Maya peeked in once, but he smiled and told her gently, "Not yet, my dear. Tonight we'll talk." The hours dragged on. Maya tried to focus on her textbooks, but the words danced uselessly on the page. She tried helping in the kitchen, but her hands shook and she nearly dropped a plate. Even the staff noticed her unease, though no one dared to ask. When evening finally came, Richard asked Maya to join him in the study. Her heart pounded as she entered the room. The heavy bookshelves, the old desk, and the warm glow of the lamp gave the room a serious atmosphere. On the desk, the same envelope lay waiting. Richard sat across from her, his face calm but his eyes thoughtful. He took the envelope, opened it slowly, and placed several documents on the table. "Maya," he began softly, "I am not a man who trusts easily. But in these few days you have shown me something I haven't seen in years. Honesty. That is why I have changed my will. Maya blinked, confused. Your will? Yes, Richard said firmly. I have decided to leave everything I own, my house, my companies, my fortune, not only to you but also in your care for something greater. My charitable foundation. Maya's mouth fell open. She shook her head. Richard, I don't understand. Why would you give all of this to me? We've only been married for a week. Richard smiled faintly. Because, my dear, I see in you what others fail to show me. You are not hungry for wealth. You are hungry for purpose, and I believe you can continue what I started. My foundation has schools, hospitals, and scholarships. I built it to help people like you once were, young, struggling, and full of dreams. I want you to lead it after me. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She had expected maybe a confession about family, or a secret about his business, but not this. Not such a heavy responsibility. She whispered, Richard, I don't know if I'm strong enough. He reached across the desk and placed his wrinkled hand gently on hers. Strength is not something you wait for, Maya. It is something you discover when life gives you the chance. And you, my dear, are ready. Before Maya could respond, Richard's face suddenly tightened. His hand clutched his chest and his body trembled. Richard, Maya cried out, rushing to his side. He collapsed back in his chair, his breath shallow, his eyes half closed. The staff came running as Maya shouted for help. The driver rushed to call the doctor while Maya held Richard's hand, tears streaming down her face. Stay with me, Richard. Please stay. The doctor arrived quickly and checked his pulse. After a tense moment, he said, It's his heart. We need to take him to the hospital immediately. They rushed him out to the waiting car. Maya sat beside him, holding his hand tightly the entire ride. The city lights flashed outside the window, but she saw nothing. All she could see was Richard's pale face, his weak smile, and the sound of his shaky breathing. At the hospital, Richard was placed in a private room. Machines beeped softly as doctors worked to stabilize him. Maya stood outside the room, her hands trembling. Memories of her decision to marry him flashed before her eyes. Was she about to lose him after just 7 days? Hours passed before the doctor finally came out. He is stable for now, the doctor said, but his condition is fragile. He must rest and avoid stress. Maya let out a shaky breath of relief. She went inside and sat by Richard's bed. His eyes slowly opened and he gave her a weak smile. I told you, I'm not as strong as I once was. Don't say that, Maya whispered, wiping her tears. You'll be fine. I'm here. Richard's fingers brushed against hers. Promise me something, Maya. Promise me you'll take care of what I leave behind. Not for me, but for the people who need it. Maya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I promise. For the next few days, Maya stayed at the hospital. She barely ate, barely slept. She sat by his side, reading to him, holding his hand or simply sitting in silence. Nurses whispered to each other about her dedication. Even the doctor remarked, She is young, but her care is stronger than many wives I've seen. But not everyone was touched. Word spread quickly about Richard's condition, and soon his relatives appeared at the hospital. They were neatly dressed, their faces sharp, their voices full of suspicion. One of his nephews pulled Maya aside. We know what you're doing. Don't think you can trick him into leaving you everything. You're nothing but a stranger in this family. Maya's eyes stung, but she stood tall. I didn't marry him for money. I married him because he asked for honesty and companionship. I care about him. That's all, the nephew scoffed. We'll see about that. Richard overheard the argument from his bed. He called for his relatives and said with surprising strength, Enough. Maya is my wife. She is here when you are not. She is the one who cares for me when you are busy chasing your own lives. If you cannot respect her, then leave. The relatives fell silent, shocked. Some left in anger, others stayed, but with lowered eyes. Maya sat by Richard, tears in her eyes again. Why did you defend me? She whispered. Richard smiled faintly. Because it is the truth. That night, as Maya watched him sleep peacefully, she realized how much her life had changed in just 7 days. She came from hunger and hardship, yet now she was trusted with something far greater than she ever imagined. Richard had given her not only a new home, but a new purpose. Still, the weight of it frightened her. She didn't know if she could carry such a legacy. But as she looked at Richard's fragile face, she knew she had no choice but to try. The hospital room grew quiet after Richard's relatives left. The soft beeping of the heart monitor filled the air. Maya sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had never felt such a mix of emotions before: fear for his health, anger at the cruel words of his family, and confusion about her own future. She looked at Richard's pale face as he slept. His breathing was shallow but steady. Every rise and fall of his chest made her whisper a silent prayer. She remembered his words: "Promise me you'll take care of what I leave behind." Those words weighed on her heart like a mountain. For the next few days, Maya refused to leave his side. She ate little, slept on the hospital chair, and often dozed off with her head resting near his hand. Nurses told her gently to rest, but she shook her head. "I can't, he needs me." One afternoon, as she sat by his bed, Richard slowly opened his eyes. His voice was weak, but his words were clear. "You are still here?" Maya smiled faintly. "Where else would I be?" He looked at her with tired eyes filled with gratitude. "You are young, Maya. You should be out there living your life. Yet you are here watching over an old man." She shook her head firmly. "You are not just an old man to me, Richard. You are my husband. I gave you my word and I will not leave you." Richard's eyes softened and a faint smile curved his lips. "You have more strength than you realize." But outside that hospital room, the storm was growing stronger. Richard's relatives returned the next day, this time more determined. They demanded to meet his lawyer. They accused Maya openly in the hallway, raising their voices. "She is only after his fortune," one shouted. "She is manipulating him while he is weak," another added. "Everything he built belongs to his blood, not to some girl he married a week ago." Maya stood frozen as their harsh words cut into her. Her heart raced, her palms grew sweaty, but she didn't cry this time. She looked at them with quiet dignity and said, "I don't want to fight with you. I only care about his health. Believe what you want, but I know why I'm here." The relatives scoffed, shaking their heads, but her calm response left them with no weapon to use against her. Later that night, Richard called Maya close. His voice was weak but filled with firmness. "I heard what they said." Maya looked down ashamed. "I didn't want you to hear. I didn't want to add to your worries." Richard squeezed her hand. "My dear, I chose you because I saw your honesty. You stood before their anger and didn't lose your dignity. That tells me I was right." Tears filled Maya's eyes. "But Richard, how long can we keep facing them? They will not stop." Richard smiled faintly. "Then let them speak. Their noise will fade. What remains will be the truth." In the following days, Maya continued to prove her care. She read to him from his favorite books, played soft music in the evenings, and made sure he never felt alone. She walked with him slowly through the hospital garden when doctors allowed, holding his arm carefully as if every step mattered. The hospital staff began to admire her. One nurse whispered to another, "She's so young, yet she cares for him like she's known him all her life." The doctor himself told Maya, "Your presence is helping him recover more than any medicine." But the relatives didn't stop. They filed complaints, demanded meetings, and even threatened to challenge Richard's will in court. One morning, Richard's lawyer came to the hospital with documents. He explained the situation calmly. "Mr. Richard has already signed his wishes. No matter what the relatives say, his decision stands. But they may still try to fight it. Be prepared." Maya listened quietly, but her heart ached. She didn't want to be seen as someone who took riches. She only wanted peace for Richard. That evening, as Richard rested, Maya sat by the window of his hospital room looking at the city lights. She thought of her mother, who had called earlier. Her mother's voice was full of worry, but also support. "Don't let them break you, Maya. You know your truth." That's enough. Those words gave her courage. The next day, the relatives barged into the hospital room again, their voices loud and angry. "She is brainwashing him. Can't you see? He is not thinking clearly," one yelled. Maya stood up, her face calm but firm. "Stop shouting. He needs rest. If you care for him, then show it by giving him peace." They glared at her, but before they could reply, Richard spoke, his voice weak but sharp. "Enough, I am not blind, and I am not a fool. Maya has shown me more care in 1 week than most of you have in years. If you cannot respect her, then leave this room at once." Silence fell. The relatives exchanged glances, but none dared to argue further. Slowly, one by one, they walked out. When the room was quiet again, Maya sat beside him, tears in her eyes. "You didn't have to do that. You need your strength." Richard gave her a faint smile. "Defending the truth gives me strength. For the first time, Maya realized that his trust in her was unshakable. He didn't see her as a girl chasing wealth, but as someone who gave him dignity in his final days. Over the next week, Richard's condition improved slightly. He could sit up more, talk longer, and even laugh at small jokes. But the shadow of his illness never left. Maya knew each day with him was a gift. One evening, as the sun set, Richard held her hand and said, "Maya, I want you to remember something. Life is not measured by how long we live, but by what we leave behind. My time may be short, but with you it feels complete." Maya's tears fell, but she nodded. "And I will carry your dreams forward. I promise." At that moment, she understood that their marriage was not about money nor about age, but about two souls meeting at the right time. One searching for stability, the other searching for honesty. And together they had found both. The days slowly turned into weeks. The hospital room, once filled with tension and fear, began to carry a calm rhythm. Maya came every morning with fresh flowers for the table by Richard's bed. She read him the news, shared small stories from her classes, and sometimes just held his hand in silence. Even in sickness, Richard found peace in her presence. But deep down, both of them knew time was not on their side. Richard's body was weakening, even as his spirit shone brighter. The doctor spoke carefully, reminding Maya that his health was fragile. Maya listened, but she never let Richard see her fear. In front of him, she was strong. One cool evening, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, Richard asked the nurse to wheel him out into the garden. Maya walked beside him, her hand on the chair, steady and gentle. Birds chirped softly, and the smell of fresh grass filled the air. Richard looked at the sky for a long time, then whispered, "Maya, promise me you will not stop living after I am gone." Her throat tightened. "Don't say that," she murmured, though her eyes filled with tears. He gave her a faint smile. "We both know. I am not afraid of leaving. What matters to me is that you continue, finish your studies, live your dreams, and take care of the foundation. That way a part of me will always live with you." Maya nodded slowly, unable to speak. Her tears rolled down, but her heart made the promise. Not long after, Richard passed away quietly one night. He held Maya's hand, whispered her name with gratitude, and closed his eyes forever. Maya sat beside him for a long time, unable to believe he was gone. The room felt heavier, emptier, and her heart felt as if it had cracked. She cried until her eyes were swollen, but even in her sorrow she remembered his final words. "Do not stop living." The funeral was attended by many. Business partners, old friends, neighbors, and even strangers came to pay respect to the man who had touched so many lives through his work and charity. Maya stood at the front, dressed in black, her face pale but calm. The whispers were still there. Some said, "She's so young. She'll inherit everything now." Others muttered, "I wonder how long she'll keep it." But Maya ignored them. She focused on honoring Richard. When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the podium. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew steady. Richard was not just a wealthy man. He was a man with a heart that wanted to give. He believed in people when others doubted them. He believed in me when I doubted myself. He gave me more than a marriage. He gave me trust and a purpose. I will carry his legacy forward not because of obligation, but because it is what he taught me. The hall grew silent. Even those who doubted her lowered their eyes. For the first time, many saw her not as a young wife, but as someone who truly carried his spirit. After the funeral, life was not easy. Richard's relatives returned, angry and bitter. They challenged the will, accusing Maya again and again. Lawyers became involved, papers were filed, and court hearings began. Maya felt exhausted, but she remembered Richard's words. "Let them speak. Their noise will fade." Each time she entered the courtroom, she stood tall, dressed simply, and spoke honestly. She told the truth about her short marriage, about the care she gave, and about the promise she made. Slowly, the judge and even the public began to see her sincerity. At last, the court confirmed Richard's will. Maya was given control not only of his wealth but also of his foundation. His relatives walked out, some furious, some ashamed. Maya did not celebrate. She simply closed her eyes and whispered, "This is for you, Richard." With the foundation in her care, Maya faced a new world. She visited schools funded by Richard's money. She spoke with students who reminded her of herself, young, poor, but full of hope. She helped expand scholarships, built new classrooms, and funded small clinics in rural areas. Each time she signed a document or cut a ribbon at a new building, she felt Richard's presence guiding her. At the same time, she continued her own studies. Balancing both was difficult, but she refused to give up. She studied late into the night, just like before, but this time in a large house filled with Richard's memories. Sometimes when the silence became heavy, she would sit in his study, staring at his portrait on the wall. "You believed in me when no one else did," she whispered to the picture. "I will not fail you." Years passed, and Maya grew stronger. The community, once filled with whispers, now looked at her with respect. Newspapers wrote articles about her work. Professors praised her determination. Students she helped wrote her letters of gratitude, calling her a light of hope. Her mother and brother were proud. Her mother often told neighbors, "My daughter didn't just marry a millionaire. She became the reason his legacy still breathes." Maya never remarried. People asked, but she always smiled softly and said, "Richard gave me enough love and trust for a lifetime. My work is my partner now." On the anniversary of his death, she held a small gathering at the foundation's new building. There, under a framed photo of Richard, she spoke again. "He left me more than wealth. He left me courage. He left me the belief that even in the darkest struggles there is light if we hold on. And for that I will be forever grateful." The crowd clapped, but Maya only looked at the photo and smiled. She felt as if Richard was still there, smiling back. And so the story of the poor student and the 75-year-old millionaire became more than a tale of gossip. It became a story of trust, respect, and legacy. It proved that sometimes life brings two people together not because of age, or wealth, or appearance, but because one has something to give, and the other has the heart to carry it forward. For Maya, the journey was never about riches. It was about keeping a promise, honoring the man who believed in her, and turning judgment into inspiration. And for Richard, his final days were not spent in loneliness, but in the warmth of someone who cared deeply. Together they showed the world that true value is not measured in money, but in kindness, honesty, and the courage to keep living even after loss. Maya stood at the foundation one evening, watching children play in the courtyard of the new school. Their laughter filled the air, and she smiled softly. She touched the necklace Richard had given her on their wedding day, still hanging close to her heart. "You see, Richard," she whispered into the breeze, "your dream lives on. And so do you. Through me, through them, through everything we built together." The wind rustled the trees gently as if carrying his reply.